And so we raised over $5 million. Then we started to deploy that capital in different companies. We invested in 5 companies. We had 2 acquisitions in the space. So after that, I mean, it's such a beautiful world. And as a gamer myself, you start to just creating some relations throughout the whole industry, and you just get involved into it. Right now, that vehicle, which is we're looking for another investments, and we're trying to create the same thing, but just for Latin America. We see that Latin America is an untapped market, and we want to jump on it. So, I mean, these kind of events just bring us closer to the audience, and in that way, we can actually look for interesting ideas and help them grow, and at the same time, invest in these companies.
Excellent, awesome. Glad to have you here, Jordan. Nicholas, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So thank you for having me. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Nicholas Sabet. I'm an attorney who is based out of Washington, D.C. I work for the global law firm of K&L Gates. And, you know, particularly for me, I chose K&L because we have over 40 offices worldwide, including one in Sao Paulo, which I'm personally proud of because I have family in Brazil. But I'm a corporate lawyer by trade. So I do a lot of work in the joint venture, private M&A, mergers and acquisitions space. I do a little work in fintech as well, but lately, lately, I mean, past 2 years, I've been educating myself and my colleagues, but lately, especially during COVID, we've seen an uptick here in the US with esports clients. So I now work with a lot of esports clients, and I'm really leading the firm in developing that practice. And we think that we're uniquely positioned in 2 ways. The first being that we have a very authentic and legitimate interest in esports. As Jordan mentioned, I'm also a gamer myself, and the close, tight-knit group of colleagues that I work with on esports-related deals and with those esports-related clients are also educated within esports. Obviously, no one's an expert, but we do like to say that we help clients by having a baseline understanding, maybe even a little more than that, really, to understand their business and help them as they go through on the legal side. The other way is, like I said, we have more than 40 offices worldwide. So the beauty of working at my firm, I think, is that I can help clients with anything. We have specialists in no matter what area you can think of. We have someone who has at least touched it, done it, or is willing to explore it. And to that end, we're trying to also show that we're a one-stop shop for esports clients. So whether they have an immigration, a player contract issue, a funding issue, often, you know, with equity raises and things like that, or IP, I mean, again, various different issues that esports teams and platforms, entrepreneurs, and just other folks in the esports ecosystem, we try to help them navigate the legal waters of that, both in the US and globally.
Excellent. Awesome. Really glad to have you here as well, Nicholas. And Pedro, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi there, guys. Thank you very much, first and foremost, for the invitation. Can you hear me well? Okay, as I was saying, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this event. It's a true pleasure, especially to also be surrounded with so many interesting and successful people in their lines of businesses. To speak a little bit about myself, okay, so I've been connected to gaming for well over 20 years now, in different areas. Initially more connected to as a gamer, as a player myself, competitively. I must say I was not that good, but either way, I've created my own game development studio back in 2007, developing social games when Facebook was not even a thing at the time, and social platforms for social gaming were virtually non-existent. However, I continue to be connected to gaming, and in 2014, I started to work on something that I thought would be the next big step, or the next evolutionary step in esports, which would be, and something that would also allow esports to become mainstream. which was the fact that sports brands, clubs, federations, national leagues, etc., would start to look into esports as a vehicle and as a means to engage with a completely different set of fans and to basically renovate their fan base. And ever since, I've been working mostly focusing on this, what I call the convergence between traditional sports and electronic sports. And have been, talking about this and advocating about this in several conferences worldwide. I've also created my own company back then. We're working on pretty much these areas in marketing, helping football clubs get into esports, worked with some clubs like Schalke 04, Celtic Glasgow, Manchester City, Paris Saint-Germain, Valencia, just to name a few, Barcelona. And more recently, I've also started to work in lecturing about esports and participating in postgraduate courses and master courses, lecturing and trying to, give to other people a little bit of the knowledge I've been able to. I was fortunate to amass in these past few years, and also working with national federations. I'm one of the board members of the Portuguese Esports Federation, also the main delegates of the Portuguese Esports Federation in the European Esports Federation, and we're also members of the International Esports Federation. So we're kind of also trying to do this work of lobbying with the government, trying to get esports recognized as all the other traditional sports, and doing this sort of lobbying and negotiating work and to get the ecosystem, the esports ecosystems, to be developed in different ways, both transversally and vertically.
Awesome, excellent. Glad to have you here as well, Pedro. Again, all of our panelists coming from excellent backgrounds, deep experience. Looking forward to this. Last message here before we get to questions. And again, questions. The chat is open for questions from the audience. And just a quick note: our roundtable here today is actually sponsored by Boa Compra, and they're a fintech company connecting international companies to local payments for over 15 years. All right, let's open it up. First questions. What do you want to know from our panelists today? I'm going to give them just a couple minutes. Usually it takes a minute for the first one to come, and then questions start rolling in. So
bring it on.
Exactly. Yeah. Go ahead and use the chat, and go ahead and drop it in here, and we're gonna get to answering some questions. There we go. We've got a question from Peter talking about the payment systems. What are the most popular payment systems in Brazil right now? And I'm assuming that that's in relation to esports. So, and as far as that, taking questions, panelists, just whoever wants to take a crack at it first, go ahead and unmute. Try and keep responses to about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and we'll just keep it rolling. Go for it, Brent.
Yeah, since I work with payment systems. So specifically in Brazil, I think, I'm not sure if that refers to specifically payment for games or in general. Obviously, Boa Compra is a big payment system. PagSeguro, there's Mercado Pago, there's a number of alternatives, of choices. Obviously, you have credit card and debit card, but a lot of people don't have those. And so, one of the things that I work with and that Bango provides is carrier billing, where you can make purchases of software or in-app payments using your phone bill. Whether you have Vivo or TIM or Oi or Claro, you can make those payments via carrier billing. And that's something that's a little bit complex in Brazil right now because of the taxation and other challenges, but it's getting very, very close to becoming far more prevalent throughout the country, which is important because a lot of people don't have or want to use credit cards, and so they can utilize through billing. But in Boa Compra, right?
Right.
Awesome alternative for payments today. So.
Awesome. Pedro, I saw you raise your hand. Did you want to add to that?
No, I was actually testing it out to see if it had similar features as other communication systems. But if no one else wants to add, I wouldn't mind answering the second question, which is from Rick Menace, unless anyone else has anything to add to what Brent just said.
Sure, we can we can keep it rolling if nobody else wants to add on payments. We've got actually a lot of questions rolling in. This is how it usually goes, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. So yeah, Brent, if you want to keep it going to the next one from Rick, let's go. Let's keep it rolling.
Okay, so I wouldn't mind picking up on the question from Rick Manasseh about how do you see the role of esports in education? Well, we're actually working on several programs regarding that. I think education is critical. There's a couple of things that education, in my opinion, is the answer for in esports and in many other things in life. One is right now, one of the biggest challenges that I think the esports industry has. So the esports industry is not too old. It's like there's been gaming competition since the 70s, but as an industry per se, the industry is about 20 to 25 years old. So it's a new industry. And a lot of people have been working in this industry for the past 20 to 25 years. A lot of them have been trying to do their best. Many of them are very successful, others not so much. But what I think biggest challenge in the esports industry right now is exactly the lack of educated skilled professionals who can actually meet the demands of this ever-growing market and this ever-growing industry. Now, as I said, a lot of the people that start working back in the industry back like 20 years ago had a lot of passion, and they still have a lot of passion for the industry, but they lack the skill sets, like actual skill sets to execute some of the functions. And nowadays, this is a mainstream industry. It's no longer something that people think it's like a kid's play. They're like a bunch of fat kids in the basement eating pizzas and drinking Cokes. It's a $1 billion industry with real entertainment, big entertainment companies and media companies investing and putting a lot of effort and a lot of production into this. So a lot of professionals with proper skills, education skills, master, higher grads and stuff like that are required in the industry. So education is the way to respond to this need. At this, on another point, and to finalize, there is one big problem in all digital areas, and esports is not exempt from it, which is cyberbullying, sexism, racism, and pretty much all toxic behavior and so on. And in my opinion, the best way to counter this sort of toxic behavior is by educating people, by telling them what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, by enforcing this from early ages and including this in educational programs, esports related and non-esports related, because digital is a major part of our lives. So the normal education, if you want to call it like this, like secondary school, primary school, etc., needs to start educating people for the advantages and disadvantages of being and thriving in a digital environment.
Excellent. Fantastic answer, Pedro. Anybody else want to add to education in esports before we move on to the big one of the big ones, I would say, which is the impact of coronavirus on esports? Anybody want to add to education?
I'll add something quick,
Nicholas.
Jason, which I think Pedro said a number of very good things that I agree with, tremendously. But I do think absolutely this is becoming a business, right? And it's no longer just there are grassroots teams, and we see those, and I talk to a lot of grassroots teams often, but at the same time, there are teams that are well worth over $150 million. They're legitimate businesses, and they require legitimate business people to be involved, right? So I'll just highlight that, and then I'll tie that into For us here in the US, and I'm sure around the world, the collegiate esport market is one that's being talked about a whole lot. And I think education obviously is tied to the collegiate esport market. And I think while we'll always have professional teams, it'll be very interesting to see over the course of the next 3 to 5 years where colleges, again, both in the US and around the world, end up in terms of bringing students and recruiting talent and offering scholarships and such for esports players, because I think that's a large gap in the market that a lot of people are trying to figure out how to currently fill.
Excellent. Awesome. Thanks for adding to that, Nicholas. All right, let's move on to the next one. From Ivan, how do you see the impact of coronavirus to holding offline esports events, not just specifically South America, but globally? Do you see people going back to offline events soon?
If you don't mind, I would like to take.
Go for it, Jordan. Would love it.
I mean, I think one of the things that made esports what it is right now, $1 billion industry, and it's actually that's directed to the esports, because if we go to gaming, that's even a more giant industry. Is that the fact that you don't need to be present for an event just to monetize on it or just to enjoy the event. I mean, one of the things that makes esports what it is the fact that you can be here I'm in Panama, based in Panama, but you can be watching a tournament in Tokyo if you want. You can be watching the League of Legends in South Asia. And I think that's where we're heading right now. I mean, that's the beauty of technology. We have been present in that since the very beginning. And I think it's going to be there's going to be a lot of a new alternative. Like there's not only going to be Twitch and YouTube gaming. There's going to be new alternatives for that. I mean, we have seen that when we see all sorts of companies creating new technologies, new communities, new channels for connecting gamers with sponsors, other gamers, with brands, with teams. Like that's just going to be the future. That was going to be the future before COVID-19, and now with COVID-19, it's actually accelerating the fact that we are all going to be connected digitally, and we are all going to be enjoying games digitally as well. So in Latin America, it's still adapting to it, but globally, I think everyone is getting up to speed on what's digital will meant for our lives.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, Jordan. Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say something, because working on offline events is something that we also do at my company. So unfortunately, no one was prepared for this pandemic situation, and there was obviously no contingency plan. It is impacting everyone. I think it's really good that people are prioritizing health and security on top of the market, and so this market, as pretty much all the other markets, is going to suffer a little bit with all of this, because it does leave a lot out of the offline events. I do expect that by the end of this year, we start seeing offline events picking up. Eventually, the major events will still go ahead. Thinking about stuff like DreamHack Winter, stuff like that. The next Intel Extreme Masters in March. But we also need to be prepared for the fact that eventually, at some point, we might not have any more physical events or offline events until the end of the year. And if that's what needs to happen to keep people safe, then that's what we need to happen. We just need to continue to do things offline. The beauty about esports, though, is that it's one of the few industries that can continue to operate without the need of physical events. It's not exactly the same thing, but we still can do like the vast majority of what we normally do online.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think esports has a big advantage in that sense. There's still a lot of industries that are not so lucky, right? So, all right. Anybody else want to add to the COVID question, or we can move on? We actually have way more questions than we can possibly get to in our time today. I'm going to do my best to get to as many as I can. All right, let's move on. We got a question from Dan. What has been the biggest barriers to entry for business models into the space, essentially South America versus North America or Europe for esports? Anybody want to take that one?
So, so I believe for me, the largest barrier of entry has been figuring out how to monetize, because someone has to pay the bills, right? And so companies come in, spend a lot of money, and when they don't get the return that they expect to pay the bills, then it makes it very challenging to move on. So I think when you come to Latin America or any place really with esports, you have to have a really solid plan for monetization and really be able to drive that value add to the end users in order to be able to monetize. Also, internet can be a challenge. The speed of internet and the reliability of internet in Latin America and other emerging markets can be challenging. That's getting much better, and with 5G, it's going to change the game. You're going to be able to have that instant broadband available for everyone as it rolls out. It's going to take a while for 5G, but I think monetization is the big one. Because if companies are not receiving, if sponsors and investors are not receiving their money back, it's going to be hard for them to continue to invest. So they have to be solid on that.
Excellent. Awesome. Great perspective, Brent. Moving on to the next one here. We've got from Cameron. I'm a university educator in the UK. We're running a new esports degree, which can be delivered worldwide. Is it worth it to reach out to Latin American partners? I don't want to steal anything from our panelists here, but I'd like to go ahead and just say yes, because esports in Latin America is already huge. But any of our panelists, you guys want to add to that? I mean, as far as you know, reaching out to Latin American partners for an esports degree.
Okay, as I mentioned, so this is also something that is already underway. It is worth it because, again, me personally, I'm working in this space. We're currently in conversations with universities a little bit around the globe. As I said, we participated in master's degrees and postgraduate and undergraduate courses in Spain, in Portugal, in Middle East and Africa, and also now in LATAM. I mean, there's already conversations that my company is having towards this, but I don't think that this should be something that, I mean, monopoly is not good for anyone. The bigger, the more offer the people have, the better. So if you feel that you have a good product that you wanna, that it can be easily adapted to the uniqueness and the idiosyncrasies of the LATAM market, by all means, go ahead and try to do the business development, because like Jason said, the market is there. It's if I'm not mistaken, all LATAM is over 500,000, over 500 million people, so or way over that. So definitely there will, esports is a big thing there in all LATAM. So the market is there. So by all means, just go ahead and try to reach out to partners.
Absolutely.
Fastest growing esports market in the world, fastest growing gaming market in the world, right? Right? So.
Fantastic. Excellent. Jordan, you want to add to that? You unmuted yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it was just want to say it's 80% compound growth every year, pretty much an average. So yeah, it's huge, and the opportunities are growing every day.
Awesome. Cameron, I hope that gave you a pretty strong answer there. Let's see here. Let's see. Inbray, I'm not really sure how to ask your question here. essentially they're saying that they have a startup in Buenos Aires, and how can they approach football clubs or universities about entering the market and developing teams to compete. I think I would need a little bit more information on that, but to really give that to the panel. I'm assuming it's an esports startup, but perhaps if the panelists are willing, maybe they could reach out to you offline on LinkedIn. Would that be all right with you guys, with a little bit more detail? Everybody go with that? Awesome. All right, we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on to the next one. I think this is actually a really strong question from Andre. What are the main? Pedro. There you go. Very good. From Andre, what are the main legal problems that you guys see in the esports market? Highly relevant. The legal structure is always something difficult to navigate in new and emerging markets. What are the biggest challenges? I actually think that Nick should probably start this one.
Yeah, I'll start as the lawyer, right? I think it's a really good question, and I think it goes back to the idea that esports, as everyone recognizes, has been around for a number of years, but really is starting to grow into, the great monster that it is now, and be really serious and become a legitimate business enterprise all over the world. So I think I say all that just to mention that probably the biggest issue that we see is that there's not enough good legal documentation, proper papering of things, legitimate, well thought out contracts that are currently out there in the market, right? So oftentimes, and I think nowhere bigger do you see this than in the player agreements. Oftentimes, player and influencer agreements, you'll have massive amounts of ambiguity, which only causes later difficulty down the road. But a lot of times they're just really poorly written, right? And it can trap both a team in paying way more than they want to through either a buyout or monthly compensation, or people can lose different kind of content creation abilities or lock up, and people are out for the season, and that can hurt everyone involved. So I think that's the biggest one. And the other thing that I'll say from a financing perspective is, we've talked about, and everyone recognizes that esports is a growing industry that needs a lot of money, and to really be a successful esports company in a way, sometimes you need to have very good funding. And oftentimes we'll see funding agreements and, equity and stock options that are, again, very poorly written, which can be dangerous. And we always tell clients, not only is it dangerous now while you're currently going through a funding, but it could hamper you down the road, right? Where you have someone like Jordan or, another very large capital group coming in and trying to invest, they will be largely put off, if not uninterested, by the fact that an organization, whether it be, a startup, a team, a platform, whatever it is, doesn't have all of their paperwork in a row, or it's not correct, right? If it's on the back of a napkin, no one's going to be very happy with that.
Excellent. Jordan, go ahead and add to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add. Yeah. Basically, yeah. I mean, when we look at these companies prior, we do the investments. I mean, usually it's all unsophisticated, so to speak. I mean, there's this bunch of guys that just decided to put something together, maybe a team, an organization, or for a platform for player enhancement, whatever. But they just don't have the background or don't have the means to pay for a guy like Nick or another buffet of lawyers that can actually structure the company the way it should be, or structure the contracts the way it should be. And it's usually, I mean, it's sad to say, but it's usually a mess. Like when you're going through this, you're going through the paperwork, you just want to know the structures, how they pay the players, how they pay the payables, how they planning to expand the business, or when they do agreements with let's say publishers or sponsors, like they get like, it's very hard to understand how they sign for these contracts, because they're getting ripped off. I mean, usually they get lockups, like crazy lockups, or they get crazy clauses that it seems like they never read them or so. But and yes, I mean, as an advice for any entrepreneur that's planning to put together something like this, I'll say just hire a good lawyer. I know it's expensive. Just I mean, probably Nick will say no to this, but pay them in equity and and avoid that retainer. But I think that's the best. I mean, when you're trying to get financing or something like that, that can be a turn off for guys like us.
Now, come on, Jordan. Everybody reads all their contracts, always, every line.
Yeah,
I
right.
don't know.
Jason, if I may, something I just want to add to that I think
Sure,
Jordan brought up,
absolutely. This is good.
really important. And again, since this is kind of my lane, I'll just take an extra second here, which is when you have a company like Jordan that comes in, as he's saying, he may be very put off by the fact that nothing's cleaned up, and he might have to pay extra if it's a good opportunity to have a lawyer come in and clean it up. And oftentimes that's the case, right? It makes sense for a lawyer to come in and really clean up the back of house, as we call it, to make it properly set up. But I think the other thing, in addition to poor legal forms, is there's a lot of people who don't have the particular understanding or nuance of what is involved in esports businesses, right? Esports businesses are businesses, right? But at the same time, they have particular nuances, whether they be how the sponsorship payments are happening, or some of the things that were mentioned, lockups, other things like that, how the player splits work, and how that will affect the business from a revenue standpoint. So in a way, absolutely, it's a new market, and it's best to first have a lawyer. But then if you can have a lawyer who understands esports, that's even better, because that will only help the business really be able to buckle down and grow to the best it can.
Absolutely. Pedro, I saw you unmute. Did you want to add anything else to that before we move on to the next big one?
Yeah, just one quick thing. So there's a lot of things into legal, and one thing that was mentioned here initially was that there's the lack of regulation. So because, and this is something that a lot of people have been working in the past few years. So because most of the governments in every country does not recognize esports to be a sport like football or any other sport or basketball, it creates a void for legality. So there's no laws specific to esports. And then there's gaps like the one mentioned here about contracts, about sponsorship contracts, about player contracts, transfers, and so on. But there's also a huge problem, and that is also this is actually an answer between both of the barriers to esports, but also the legalities of it. Because there's also no regulation. There's also one of the reasons why there's also no regulation is because, unlike any other traditional sport, esports has a major aspect that needs to be taken into consideration, which is the sport itself is owned. It's the IP of a private company. Like I usually do this comparison with football or soccer for those in the States. Like, who owns soccer? No one does. Okay, so if I want to do a soccer tournament in my backyard with my friends and throw a 1 million prize pool and say that you can only score goals with your hands inside the goal area, I can do it. FIFA won't do anything about it. The Portuguese Football Federation will not do anything about it. It's my money, it's my backyard, I do whatever I want. And football is not owned by anyone, right? I cannot create a professional league though, because that is exclusive to the local federation. However, in esports, if I want to do a League of Legends tournament in my backyard with my friends, change the rules of the game and offer a $1 million prize pool, I cannot. I will immediately be, starting to have problems with Riot or whatever publisher. And this creates a big barrier. And this is one of the main reasons why governments are not yet comfortable, and a lot of other agents in the market are not comfortable about this and getting into esports and trying. There's a lack of regulation, and this creates many of the other problems that are subsequent, like that then branch out to player contracts, to teams, and how exactly does a team need to? What does a team need to do to be legal, like an esports team? How does an esports team incorporate? There's no specific incorporation for an esports team. Is it a sports team? It is an entertainment company? Is it an association? What is it? All of these create a very, very, very complicated legal framework to deal with.
I agree. That's actually a very, very good point, Pedro, as far as especially the IP being owned by a specific company. I mean, I guess we could enter a world where just whoever wins the World Cup owns soccer for 4 years, right? Maybe.
Well, in that case, then Portugal would own soccer in Europe then.
Right. There you go.
That's good.
So real
Like
quick,
that.
just to let everybody know, we have 10 more minutes left. We have to stop at 5 minutes to the hour. So I'm not going to get to everybody's questions. I apologize. We have so much participation today. I think this might be the most participation I've ever had in an Ask Me Anything. So this is to our audience. Thank you so much for your participation. If I'm not able to get to your question, it seems like the panelists are okay with this. Reach out to them on LinkedIn and ask your question. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer it. I'm going to take one more here, and I think this is probably going to take up the rest of our time, but maybe we'll have a little bit more. But I'm going to combine two questions. So Jessica mentioned allegedly esports organizations are not profitable, and that could be due to infancy in the industry. How could this, how could this solve this problem, or how could an organization solve this problem in your opinion? And Andre also asked, do you see esports organization as a business investment opportunity or good business investment opportunity? And what are the KPIs that we look for in these investment opportunities? I feel like these questions are very complementary. So is it, I think that the profitability of esports is very relative to whether it's a good investment opportunity. And certainly the KPIs and how it's structured is relevant to that as well, or what can be improved. I'd like to combine those two questions together and open up to our panel. And I'm almost certainly, and we're going to hear from everybody on this one, but just keep in mind we've got about 10 minutes left, and then we're going to wrap it up. All right. Have at it. Who wants to take this first? Jordan. Perfect.
I'm going to take it first.
Start us off.
Yeah, I'm going to make it quick so everyone can speak about it too. I think when we see any sports company, what we see is a technology company in a base. I mean, you just look as an investment, you just look for comparables, right? You just want to try to put the right price into it. Is it profitable? You will see companies like Uber that's still not profitable after, let's say, 10 years. It's gone public. They have a 20 to 30 million market cap. They're still not profitable. That doesn't mean it's a bad investment. So basically, the KPIs that you look for is adaptation, player integration, or just reach. I mean, if you have a platform that it's being downloaded by 500,000 people, that means that it's getting to somewhere, right? That means it has some traction, and that's a good investment. I mean, that's the way you can bring sponsors. That's the way you can bring capital. That's the way you know your brand is being heard or is being known. So that's one of the KPIs that you look for. Of course, revenues is important. It all depends on the kind of business model. Sometimes the reach of the company, of the reach of the brand is more important than the revenues. So you play with this game of freemium play or however you want to call it. And it all depends. It always varies depending on the kind of business model. But one of the KPIs that we look usually for is that the player has a large audience.
Excellent, solid answer, Jordan. Brent, keep it going.
Yeah, so I really believe that COVID is going to actually help bring more profit to esports, and I say that in a way that COVID is pulling in esports by about 5 years. So where we would have been at 5 years from now, we're going to get there in the next probably year. And that is moving away from these monstrous events that cost millions of dollars to take place and take a lot of money and a lot of the profit out of sponsorships and other revenues, and moving towards a model where you have a lot more, you have access to a lot more people, you have a lot more smaller events with a lot more people and new revenue generation opportunities that you can get more profit from a digital perspective. So I think the big events are great to have the matchmaking and to have that physical presence But I think having more events online and being able to monetize better, having better strategies to monetize through, which is easier online, as well as mobility. So mobile esports is growing like crazy right now. And mobile in and of itself has a better monetization model than PC and console, et cetera. So I think with the combination of that, we're going to be able to see better. Even the same amount of revenue will have much better profits because you're not spending those millions and millions of dollars on these monstrous events.
Absolutely awesome.
Can I just add to something to what was just said?
Yeah.
So
Pedro and Nicholas. Yep.
Yeah, very important topic that was just brought into the conversation. So mobile is the biggest growing sub-market within esports. And this ties perfectly with something that was said earlier, I think also by Brent, which is some of the challenges you have in some markets to get into some markets, which is infrastructure. So like we're working a lot with Africa, Middle East, and South America. In some countries of these regions, of these continents, there is a lot of the countries don't even have basic sanitation in their home. People do not have enough money to buy PCs. Little people have money to buy consoles, but the vast majority of people have mobile phones, smartphones. Okay, so mobile is in fact a really good way to go, a really good opportunity. It has a higher ROI, return of investment, for those who actually invest, and it's somehow easier to set up in some ways. In many ways, it's easier to set up, even for offline events, a mobile tournament or a mobile activation than for offline. But it is just bear in mind one example. So if you want to do a PUBG tournament, for instance, which is a battle royale tournament, you need to have up to 100 PCs, because that's how big. Well, you have smaller maps, but if you do a full battle royale, you have to have up to 100 PCs, including the space for all of these PC servers, etc., to run an offline tournament. If you want to do the same thing in PUBG Mobile, first of all, the map is smaller, is for 50, but even if it was 100, getting 100 people next to each other with mobile phones takes much less space, and it's much less of a challenge, technical challenge, infrastructural challenge to.
Oh, Pedro, you lost your audio there.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, because I was kind of pressing space, but that was pretty much it, yeah.
Okay, excellent.
And just one thing to add to Pedro's comments is, with mobility, you're going to have, everyone can compete now. So you're going to have a massive amount of more competitors because of the low cost of entry. Everyone has a cell phone, and not everyone has a $500 console or a $1,500, $2,000 PC. So you're going to be able to have a lot more competitors.
1,500 is a little ambitious for a competitive PC. I think that you're looking at more like 2,500.
Yeah, $2,000, 2,500. It depends on the market, but yeah, and it depends on the game also.
Excellent, Nicholas. Go ahead and wrap us up here on this topic, yeah, sure. and then we'll need to get rolling.
To the question of, do I think esports companies and organizations can be profitable? Absolutely. I think, as Brent very smartly said, COVID has certainly accelerated that timeline for a lot of people. And I think it just comes down to content, whether you're consuming it on the computer or whether you're consuming it on your mobile device. I think the world around, people will certainly continue to watch more and more content. And 5-10 years from now, I definitely see a world where esports is much more consumed and paid attention to than certain traditional sports. And I think that's just by virtue of the shift in generation, which is that younger kids often are getting their phones or access to some sort of technological device earlier, and as a result will engage within esports and gaming a lot sooner, and will continue for a lot longer than you or I. With that will come a lot of sponsors, both endemic and non-endemic. So I think, insurance providers, for instance, energy drink companies, of course, those are typical, but insurance providers, mortgage lenders, other, non-traditional things that you would associate with esports will certainly come in and start pouring money into esports, in my opinion, as sponsors, because they want to be able to connect with younger and younger and more people around the world to be able to, from a marketing perspective. At the end of the day, to me, esports is great, but I really think it is a largely marketing and technology business. And that's what it comes down to. And marketing and technology, historically have been very good businesses where people can make lots of money.
Absolutely. Especially, scalability becomes a big factor there as well. Awesome. Our panelists, thank you so much. Pedro, Jordan, Brent, Nicholas, you guys were awesome. Awesome answers. This is a great panel, a lot of expertise here. And again, to our audience, I'm so sorry that I was not able to get to all the questions. You guys were so involved. I love it. Please feel free to reach out privately to our panelists, but also Dirk just reminded me, we are going to be organizing another panel soon. So if we didn't get to your questions and you're not able to reach people offline, just hang on. We're going to do this again. So to our panelists, thanks again for being here. All of you. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
So much.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. All right. And then last but not least, again, this was sponsored by Boa Compra. Local payments for international companies for over 15 years, monetization. Thank you so much. Everybody have a wonderful day. See you next time. Take care.
Ciao, guys.
Thanks,
Take care.
guys.
Thanks.
Go esports in Latin America.
That's right. Latin American.
Yeah. Woo.
Yeah.